Hi everyone, my name is Ariana OMB. Today I'll be presenting When Adults Carry Trauma 2, Expanding Tier 1 MTSS, Integrating Adult ACE Awareness as a Universal Prevention Strategy in Schools. This presentation focuses on how supporting educator self-awareness and regulation can function as a universal preventative approach within trauma-informed schools. What happens when the adult in the room is also carrying trauma? Picture this. It's the afternoon in a busy middle school classroom. A student digs in their heels, shoves back their chair, crosses their arms, and declares, "I'm not doing this." The teacher's heart skips a beat. Their chest feels like a drum solo, and boom, the student's off to the principal's office. From the outside, this might look like a typical behavioral issue. But what if both the student and the educator are responding from a place of stress shaped by past experiences? This question is what drives the focus of this work. Before going further, I want to clearly state the central argument of this presentation. Trauma-informed practice often focuses on students, but adult stress responses are frequently overlooked. Educator regulation directly shapes classroom climate. This presentation introduces Tier 1 MTSS framework that positions adult ACE awareness as a universal prevention strategy to improve educator regulation and classroom climate. Adverse childhood experiences are highly prevalent. Research shows that nearly 2 out of 3 adults report at least one ACE. These experiences, such as abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction, can have lasting effects on brain development, stress response systems, and emotional regulation. This means that in school settings, many educators are not only supporting trauma-impacted students, they may also be carrying their own histories of stress and adversity. This matters because trauma impacts both students and adults in the system. ACEs are associated with increased risk for mental health challenges, behavioral difficulties, and academic struggles. Trauma affects executive functioning, attention, and emotional regulation. At the same time, educator well-being plays a critical role in shaping classroom climate and student outcomes. Secondary traumatic stress and prior ACE exposure can influence how educators respond to student behavior, especially in high-stress moments. This framework is grounded in research. We know that ACEs are highly prevalent among adults and are associated with increased emotional reactivity and stress dysregulation. Educators are also impacted by secondary traumatic stress, particularly when working with trauma-impacted students. Importantly, educator well-being has been shown to directly influence classroom climate and student outcomes. In trauma-informed systems, it's important to recognize that stress responses in educators are not a sign of failure. They are physiological. Educators working with trauma-impacted students are at increased risk for secondary traumatic stress and compassion fatigue. This framework emphasizes the importance of understanding the difference between reacting and responding. With the right support, educators can learn strategies such as grounding, pausing, and emotional regulation techniques to respond more intentionally in challenging situations. This is the core of this presentation. At Tier 1, we begin with psychoeducation and build into self-awareness through voluntary ACE reflection. This is supported by structured, reflective support systems. The goal is to strengthen adult emotional regulation, which directly influences classroom climate and ultimately improves student outcomes. This positions adult ACE awareness as a preventative systems-level intervention. This slide illustrates the escalation cycle. Student behavior can serve as a trigger that activates an adult stress response. Think of a common student behavior: defiance, disengagement, or emotional escalation. Now mentally trace this cycle. What's the trigger? What happens in the body? What response follows? This can escalate interactions, resulting in reactive discipline or conflict. Research suggests that prior trauma exposure can increase sensitivity to these triggers. Understanding this cycle is critical because it shifts the focus from blame and shame to awareness and prevention. This brings us to the multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS. Tier 1 represents universal prevention, support provided to all individuals within the system, not just the students. In this framework, Tier 1 includes adult-focused supports, such as psychoeducation on trauma, understanding the neurobiology of stress, and opportunities for reflective awareness. The goal is to build a foundation of knowledge and self-awareness that supports both educators and students. Also, the reason that there is gift cards with a question mark over top of them is because when I was presenting this to the school that I was working at, I reached out to the community that I was working in, and they said that they would love to support the educators, administrators, and support staff within the school with gift cards and gift certificates to local businesses, local restaurants, local salons, local shops, different ways that the teachers, educators, support staff could use to take care of themselves and relieve some of that tension and stress that they sometimes bring into the school environment with them. So the community wants to be there to support the adults that are supporting our students. A key component of this framework is adult-based reflection. This process is entirely voluntary and confidential. This is not used for assessment, diagnosis, or evaluation. Instead, it is designed to increase awareness of personal triggers, stress responses, and emotional regulation patterns. By recognizing these patterns, educators, support staff, and administrators can better understand their reactions and develop more intentional responses in the school environment. Awareness alone is not enough. Support systems are always essential. This framework includes reflective support spaces such as group processing, one-on-one consultation, and structured debriefing opportunities. These are not therapy spaces, but professional environments for reflection and support. Providing educators, administrators, and support staff with a space to process stress can improve emotional regulation and reduce burnout, ultimately strengthening their ability to support students effectively. Consider your school, the school that you went to, or the school that your student goes to. How often do educators, administrators, or support staff actually have space to reflect on their own stress patterns, their own triggers, their own things that they need to process that comes up within a school environment? Psychological safety is critical. Without support, educators may experience burnout, emotional fatigue, and compassion fatigue. With strong support systems, educators, administrators, and school support staff are more likely to feel valued, heard, and empowered. Which environment do you think leads to better outcomes for students? Research supports that when educators feel supported, they are more effective in trauma-informed practice. When adult regulation improves, the impact extends beyond the individual. We often see reductions in reactive discipline practices, stronger educator-student relationships, and more positive classroom climates. This leads to increased student engagement and improved overall outcomes. In this way, supporting adult regulation functions as a systems-level intervention. To evaluate the effectiveness of this framework, it's important to move beyond design and look at measurable systems-level outcomes. First, we would expect to see a reduction in discipline referrals, particularly those related to reactive or escalated responses. Second, staff self-reported regulation competence can be measured through surveys, looking at how prepared educators feel to manage stress and respond to student behavior. We would also examine trends in burnout, compassion fatigue, and staff retention, as these are critical indicators of sustainability. In addition to that, classroom climate and student engagement data provide insight into how these adult-focused supports are impacting the learning environment. Finally, implementation tracking for participation in Tier 1 supports such as professional development and reflective spaces help ensure the framework is being applied consistently. Together, these indicators allow us to assess whether supporting adult regulation is producing meaningful school-wide change. These are indicators that schools are already collecting, which makes this framework completely feasible to implement. This positions school social workers not only as service providers, but as key contributors to data-informed systems-level interventions. Ethical considerations are essential in this work. Participation in ACE reflection must remain voluntary. Confidentiality must be strictly maintained. There should be no use of personal data for evaluation or administrative decision-making. The focus remains on awareness and professional growth, not assessment. Evaluating success should focus on systems level indicators such as staff perceptions, school climate, and retention. This framework aligns closely with core social work competencies. It supports ethical and professional behavior through confidentiality and informed participation. It acknowledges diversity and lived experience by recognizing the varied backgrounds of both students and administrators, school support staff, and educators. And it engages multiple system levels by strengthening relationships and improving organizational functioning within schools. This framework has several important implications for school social work practice. First, it expands the role of school social workers within MTSS by intentionally integrating adult-focused supports into Tier 1. This moves beyond a solely student-centered approach and recognizes educators and support staff as part of the intervention system. Second, it broadens trauma-informed practice. Rather than focusing only on student behavior, it includes the impact of adult stress responses and emphasizes regulation at all levels of the system. Third, school social workers are well positioned to lead this work through professional development, particularly in areas such as stress neurobiology, emotional regulation, and the difference between reacting and responding. In addition, this framework highlights the importance of creating structured, reflective support systems for staff, such as consultation spaces, debriefing opportunities, and facilitated reflection. Finally, this approach positions school social workers not only as service providers, but as systems-level practitioners who contribute to school climate, staff well-being, and overall student outcomes. Overall, this framework reinforces that supporting the adults in the building is a critical component of supporting the students. Trauma-informed schools do not begin with student behavior. They begin by supporting the nervous systems of the adults who teach, lead, and support students. Trauma-informed practice cannot be fully realized if it focuses solely on students, and adult regulation remains an expectation rather than a Tier 1 priority as well. Sustainable change occurs when adult regulation, student skill building, and systems-level supports work together. Thank you.